Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a fascinating microscopic world. For decades, whenever we talked about psychedelics, it was purely about the mind, right? Perception, trips, and brain chemistry. But science is finally revealing something so much deeper. Psilocybin does way more than just alter consciousness. We're actually talking about rewriting the body's entire inflammatory code.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty provocative thought. One that really challenges everything we think we know about mental health. If I asked you right now, hey, what causes depression? You'd probably say, oh, it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. Specifically, a lack of serotonin. We've all heard that. But what if the root cause isn't just in the brain at all? What if depression is actually, at its very core, an immune system problem? See, there's this silent epidemic of chronic inflammation happening right now, and traditional SSRIs, they just can't fix it. The data is wild. It shows that roughly 1 in 3 adults dealing with treatment-resistant depression are actually walking around with highly elevated inflammatory biomarkers, stuff like C-reactive protein. Essentially, they fall into what's called an immune inflammatory subtype of depression. And this is exactly where psilocybin might be the missing key.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover the invisible inflammatory burden, the 5-HT2A immune gateway, microglia as our brain's immune guardians, the gut-brain immune axis, the immune hypothesis of depression, and we'll wrap up with the clinical evidence in healing. Let's get right into it. Starting off with part 1, the invisible inflammatory burden, or chronic inflammation in modern biology.
We really need to start with the invisible antagonist of our own biology. Think about acute inflammation for a second. Like, you get a cut on your finger, right? That is a brilliant survival mechanism. Your immune cells rush in, they fix the damage, and then, crucially, they shut off. But when that molecular alarm bell never stops ringing, well, cytokines just leak into your circulation for years. And this chronic state isn't just a physical ache or pain. It literally drives the pathophysiology of depression and anxiety. It fractures our sleep architecture, erodes our cognition, and even accelerates neurodegeneration. It's a devastating systemic cascade.
Which brings us to part 2, the 5-HT2A immune gateway, and how psilocybin actually speaks to our cells. Now, meet the unexpected hero of our cellular journey. The 5-HT2A receptor is psilocybin's primary molecular target. And here is the absolutely crucial part. It's not just sitting up there in your brain causing perceptual effects. It is expressed across virtually your entire immune system. That means the moment psilocybin enters your body, it's immediately interacting with your T cells and macrophages, the foot soldiers of your immune system. Psilocybin is simultaneously modulating immune signaling throughout your entire body.
To put that into perspective, the preclinical data from Now and colleagues back in 2013 shows exactly what happens when this receptor gets activated. So, TNF-alpha is basically one of our body's most potent inflammatory fire alarms. But when the 5-HT2A receptor is stimulated by psilocybin, the production of that TNF-alpha literally plummets by an incredible 40 to 60%. It essentially just reaches in and turns the inflammation off.
And this grounds us in a really stunning realization. Psilocybin is quite literally speaking the native language of your immune cells. As Madden and colleagues stated so perfectly back in 2016, the immune system is not merely influenced by the serotonin system. It is a serotonin-responsive system. It is fundamentally built to listen to these compounds. Crazy, right? All right, moving into part 3, microglia, the brain's immune guardians. So let's zoom in on the brain specifically. Because if your whole body is reacting to these compounds, we really need to see what's happening right inside your skull. Now, you might be surprised to learn that up to 15% of all the cells in your central nervous system are microglia. Up to 15%. That is a massive portion of your brain dedicated entirely to acting as resident immune guardians, just constantly surveying the neural environment for threats.
Now, these microglia basically live in 2 modes. In their resting state, they are absolutely essential. They prune connections, they clear away cellular debris, basically keeping your brain nice and tidy. But chronic stress forces them into an activated state. And when that happens, they act like a localized fire. They release damaging pro-inflammatory cytokines and actively suppress neuroplasticity. Specifically, they block BDNF, which, if you don't know, is the absolutely crucial protein for learning and memory. Psilocybin steps in right there, via those 5-HT2A receptors, and interrupts the whole cycle, essentially telling the microglia to stand down and shift back into a healing state.
Now for part 4, the gut-brain immune axis. This is where 90% of the story actually lives.
We've spent a lot of time looking at the brain, but we really need to zoom out to your body's second brain. I mean, it is absolutely mind-blowing to think that 90% of your body's circulating serotonin is actually produced down in your gut, which, by the way, also happens to house 70% of your entire immune system. So the vast majority of the serotonin infrastructure that psilocybin interacts with, it's not even up in your head. It's sitting right there in your digestive tract. Because psilocybin acts simultaneously in the brain, the gut, and all those peripheral immune tissues, it has the unique potential to address microbiome dysbiosis. That imbalance of gut bacteria that is so strongly tied to depression. It isn't just fixing a localized issue. It's acting as this rare, whole-system immunomodulator. Honestly, no conventional pharmaceutical has ever achieved this kind of cross-system reset. It's a real game changer.
Which leads us perfectly into Part 5, the immune hypothesis of depression and rethinking the root cause.
Okay, armed with all this cellular understanding, we are finally ready for a monumental paradigm shift in psychiatry. The old conventional neurochemical model basically assumed that a serotonin deficiency was driving low mood. But that just lacks robust direct evidence today. Instead, the inflammatory hypothesis argues that immune dysregulation and chronic neuroinflammation are what actually drive depression. And this perfectly explains why treating inflammation might finally heal the 30 to 40% of depressed patients who just do not respond to traditional SSRIs.
I like to think of this as a biological domino effect that basically resets your HPA stress axis. Step 1, it starts in the mind by quieting the default mode network and reducing rumination. Step 2, that physically lowers your HPA stress axis activation. Step 3, it restores immune balance and significantly reduces systemic inflammation. And finally, Step 4. With the inflammation gone, your brain is cleared to enhance neuroplasticity and actually sustain those antidepressant effects.
Finally, Part 6, clinical evidence and healing, the human reality. Let's bring all this cellular data back down to the human level and look at what the actual trials show. These landmark studies suggest that the immune changes we're seeing aren't just some happy side effect of a better mood. They are a mechanistically relevant driving force of the healing itself. In a major 2021 trial, Carhart-Harris found that psilocybin actually outperformed a leading SSRI when it came to reducing systemic inflammation. And then Davis and colleagues proved a really significant correlation. As the inflammatory biomarkers went down, the depressive symptoms lifted.
But, of course, the healing doesn't just end the minute the psilocybin wears off. There's this 3-week integration window of enhanced neuroplasticity, and it overlaps perfectly with a drop in inflammation. Because BDNF, that neuroplasticity protein, and inflammation are tightly inversely coupled, your daily choices matter immensely here. By integrating an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, prioritizing your sleep, getting exercise, eating a good diet, you actively keep that inflammation low. You are physically sustaining your brain's brand new neural wiring. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a profound realization about the deeply interconnected nature of your own body and mind. The old boundaries between psychology and immunology, they're dissolving right before our eyes. Our thoughts influence our cells, and our immune system influences our thoughts. It's the whole shebang. So I'll leave you with this question. If healing the mind and healing the immune system are the exact same biological process, how will you rewrite your own inflammatory code? Thanks for joining me today, and stay curious.